Zambo, and welcome to Dawai Kudroen. I have Honorable Minister of Education, Mr. Thakur Singh Powdyel, as my guest tonight. Thank you, Your Excellency, for being here. It's really difficult to come up with too many questions to somebody as vocal as Your Excellency. So let me straight away go to the first question. Your Excellency, why is teaching not considered a noble profession in Bhutan? I've heard that, forget the rest of the individuals, even teachers themselves, I believe, wouldn't consider teaching as a noble profession. If you ask someone, what is your profession, they'll simply say, I'm a simple teacher, I'm just a teacher. Why is that?
It's an honor to be a guest with Dawa here. This is a profound question. It's ironical that the noble profession should be today looked down upon as something that is to be either dreaded or disliked. I think it is not only here in Bhutan that teaching is not as popular or as well favored as some other professions are. Around the world today, except for a few countries, teaching is not necessarily the first choice for most people. In Bhutan, we've had a very long tradition of teaching, and we have a system whereby we hold our teachers very high in the society. We hold our teachers in very high regard. That's why our teachers are called Lopins, King of Knowledge or Queen of Knowledge. However, over the past some decades or years, there's been some kind of a decline in the way teachers are looked at. Perhaps this is because in the past, teachers were primarily the only source of knowledge,
Yes.
the only source of information in the society. There would be very few educated people in the society, and among the few, the teacher or the headmaster in the village school would have been one. So the people in the community looked up to the teacher with respect. The students looked up to the teacher with respect, because the teacher was almost exclusively the source of knowledge, source of information. But today there are so many different sources of information.
Yes.
There's the mass media, there are a lot of educated people around. So the teacher is not necessarily the only source of knowledge and information today. So the teacher is having to compete for that limited space among so many other players. And also teaching is a very difficult job. It is an extremely challenging, difficult, demanding job. It takes everything out of you. There is a physical demand, there's an emotional, psychological, intellectual demand. So it's an extremely difficult, exhausting, demanding job. And not everybody has that courage. Not everybody has that mental makeup to take up the challenges that teaching imposes. So that's why a lot of the people shy away from teaching. And the other thing perhaps is teaching is not as lucrative as other jobs. People may not do as hard a work, as hard a job as teachers, but they could be making a lot of money. So in terms of benefits, if people look at it from the conventional point of view, teaching is not as lucrative. However, very many people fail to realize that there are inherent benefits. There are inherent rewards in the mission called teaching. And it is very difficult for people generally to discover the inherent benefits, the inherent rewards in teaching. So while teaching is very difficult and challenging, but at the same time it's a deeply, deeply fulfilling profession. Because your rewards may not come in material terms, in physical terms, in economic terms, but our teachers' rewards might come 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, 15, 20 years down the line, and at that point in time you feel that you have invested your life, you have invested your time and efforts in doing something really noble for the society. So it is basically a question of understanding what it takes to be a teacher. So even though a lot of our fellow teachers may have come into teaching not necessarily because it's their first choice, but over time they also learn and they discover
Yes.
the beauty and the charm together with the challenge that teaching entails. So I believe that while public opinion may not be so much in favor of teaching as a noble profession, but we do have some outstanding teachers in the system.
Yes.
They are committed, they're passionate about teaching. So it's basically a question of one's choice. Teaching is not for anybody and everybody. It is for somebody. And these people have discovered what teaching is. So even though the society may not look upon teaching as the most desirable or the most fulfilling profession, there are people out there who have been going on from day to day, year to year, making sure that our children are given the education that they deserve, that the flag flies and the morning assembly is conducted, the national anthem is sung, that the knowledge of the different sciences, mathematics, literature, history, geography, humanities, actually comes to the children. So there are people who are still very committed, even though the large majority may find teaching an extremely difficult and exhausting job.
Yes. Your Excellency, on a personal note, you have been considered as an extraordinarily credible and outstanding teacher in your times, and you have served as a teacher for so many years. Why did you choose to become a teacher? Was it by default or was it by design?
You have been very kind, Dawa, with your comment. Actually, in my time, there were many options available. One could have gone to any other ministry, taken up any other job. But deep inside, I always thought that I would be an educator. I had some fantastic teachers, great educationists who have been my inspiration. And I really didn't think of myself doing anything else. So it was a kind of a deep desire. And I'm very glad that I'm a teacher, because teaching has allowed me to share some of my deep convictions, my beliefs, with a large number of our Bhutanese young men and women. And it has also been a kind of a medium through which I've been able to share some of my beliefs about the larger issues of life, the relationship between citizens and state, the relationship between human beings and the natural environment, the cosmos. So it has been a wonderful medium through which I've been able to express and share some of my deeply held beliefs, my convictions, my philosophy about life, about the fundamental relationships. So I'm very fortunate that I've been able to, if I find this space where I could express myself, and also have the opportunity to share my life and my dreams with so many young men and women of this country.
Yes. Your Excellency, what can we do to make teaching an attractive profession? You mentioned that teaching is not lucrative. You mentioned that teaching has so many challenges, so many hurdles for one to teach and to become a good teacher. With all these challenges staked against you, what can we do to make teaching an attractive profession? Because, as you said, reward comes only after 10, 15 years or so. And 10, 15 years is too long a wait in one's career.
Indeed. Actually, I believe that teachers are at the central position. Teachers occupy the center stage, in other words, in the whole scheme of education. And when we talk about education and the quality of education, we are actually talking about the quality of our teachers, quality of our educators. So we need to have the very best men and women of the country in teaching. The brightest young men and women of Bhutan must choose to be teachers if if we want to improve, develop our society. Because at the end of the day, um, we have to decide what is important for the country. Is simply developing the objective life of the society important, or do we also have to look at the subjective life, the intellectual life, the moral life, the ethical life, the spiritual life of the society? And I believe this is where teaching and teachers' role comes as as an important instrument in actually enabling a society to express itself subjectively as well as objectively. So while money is important, while economic incentives are important, these are not necessarily the only or the sole factors that influence the quality of teachers. Some are born teachers. They do not need any incentive. They take teaching as a natural expression of their life. So, but there are very few people. I look at teachers as belonging to two categories. Some are born teachers, some are inspired teachers, and others are made teachers. Inspired teachers or born teachers do not need very many external incentives. It is the made teachers who would actually depend upon a lot of the external incentives and benefits.
And Your Excellency, don't you think we have too many made teachers than the inspired or the one that Your Excellency mentioned?
I think we have a lot of made teachers, but even made teachers do a very good job. If we have everybody who is an inspired or a made teacher, we're going to have a wonderful situation. But we also have people who can actually be as good as inspired teachers, even though they may have begun as made teachers initially.
Yes.
So to respond to your question about what we can do about attracting people, the Ministry of Education has actually developed a master plan
Yes.
for to address the needs of teachers, and we have actually begun implementing this master plan. It is a comprehensive a long-term master plan that takes into account what kind of cadre we need to have for teachers, what kind of in-service program we need to mount for teachers, what professional development opportunities we need to create. So we hope that in the next couple of years we should be able to actually help our fellow teachers to be able to acquire the necessary skills and also experience as well as gain professional development. And we are actually developing a college fully dedicated to in-service education. So the pre-service education will be provided by the two colleges of education under the Royal University of Bhutan, but we also have a fully dedicated in-service education college where the inset master plan is going to be implemented. And also we have today a tremendous support from the royal government, and in fact in the very recent past we have received great inspiration and support from His Majesty the King himself, as the nation would have witnessed on the 17th of December this year on our National Day. His Majesty, our beloved King, was so very kind to confer on something like 112 of our educators the prestigious National Order of Merit. And this is something that money cannot buy. This doesn't have. This has more than it transcends all economic benefits. This is something very special. And similarly, there are other support mechanisms that are being put in place. So we hope that with all these different kinds of material as well as non-material incentives, we'll be able to attract some good, bright young men and women into the teaching profession as the days go by. It is very important. If we want, if we mean anything by serving our country, of course there are so many different ways of serving our country, but I think one very, very important way to serve and promote and build our country is through education. And if in order to do that, we must simply have the brightest young men and women come into teaching.
Yes. Your Excellency, now moving on, how much do you and your ministry give stress on the value-based education in our system? Today, when you talk about values in our system, many feel that it's on the decline, simply because the younger generation would not really want to uphold or would not really take so much of interest in practicing or putting into practice what we already have in our system, and would not really take so much of interest in inheriting the all-time or time-tested values that we have in our system. So the question is, do you really stress on bringing a value-based education system in our country rather than focusing on the subject knowledge that we have?
Indeed we do. Education without values is a valley of dry bones. We cannot think of education without values. Education is a normative science or a normative art. It teaches people the way they ought to behave, they ought to think, they ought to present themselves. So there have been many efforts to inculcate values in young people, and these efforts have actually paid off quite well. However, we made a big move in the Ministry of Education in 2010 when we introduced this nationwide reform initiative called Educating for Gross National Happiness. And this program of Educating for Gross National Happiness is to be operationalized through building green schools. And green schools have at least 8 different elements. And some of these elements are directly related to building values. And we hope that especially the element of social greenery, the element of spiritual greenery, the element of moral or ethical greenery are directly related to building values in young people. But and to that extent, we have also trained all our school principals. Every single principal in Bhutan has been put through a program whereby they have been empowered and trained to inculcate ideas of gross national happiness, ideas of green schools into the overall life of the school. So we have made significant efforts in this direction, and while we could have done much more, I'm quite glad to see a lot of good things being done by our schools. Some of our schools have exceeded our expectations. Some have made very good progress, while many others are in fact struggling. But overall, I feel that barring some exceptions, our Bhutanese children are good. Our Bhutanese young men and women are good human beings. Sometimes they might go astray, they might follow the wrong way, but it is not necessarily because they are bad, but because maybe sometimes they are not getting the right direction and right mentoring. But I think our children are a credit to us. The whole future depends upon them. So we need to help them, we need to bring them along properly, and also give them the space in which to grow. So there are conscious ways in which we teach values, but there are also so many indirect and subtle ways in which values are to be taught to our children. However, one thing that we need to remember about values is that values are not so much to be talked about. Values are to be lived out personally. So it is not only a question of telling the children how to behave, how to think, how to conduct themselves, but it is for the elders, it is for the parents, it is for the teachers, it is for the society to show to the young people, to show to the children examples of good values, examples of good behavior. So children will see and behave themselves accordingly. But simply telling them how to conduct themselves is not going to be adequate. We owe it to the children to live out the values that we talk about. So values are to be not to be talked about, but actually lived out. And everybody has to do this.
Your Excellency, do you see these role models today? Because I think one would not hesitate to say that at least in our society we are leaving education to the schools alone.
Indeed. This is unfortunate. Actually, the education should be everybody's responsibility. Every single individual in the society should be concerned about education, as it happens elsewhere. Here, unfortunately, we leave education to schools, to the Ministry of Education, to our teachers, and that's it. Our parents don't seem to have much time for the children, and our children don't have the opportunity to learn a lot from parents who are good readers, parents who are good writers, parents who are good speakers, parents who themselves are good role models. I see that our children are torn between two worlds. One is the world of the school, And in the school, by virtue of our work, by the nature of our work, we have to teach, and we teach children how to be a good human being, how to behave well, how to think well, how to grow up into a good, well-balanced, well-integrated human being, harmoniously developed individual. But the moment they cross the school gate, the world outside the school gate is very different. They pass through the market, they pass through the streets, and what do they see in the market? Bars and bars and more bars. The kinds of games that are available, the kinds of activities which are seen in the market. These are not helpful.
But Your Excellency, what can one do? All these bars are also our own making.
They are indeed. So we hope that there will be some soul searching in all the people, because if we know that these items, these commodities are destroying our young people, if these commodities are spoiling the future of our people, spoiling our families, the health of our people, people have to think twice.
Yes.
Whether simply making money is important or looking after the health of the general public is important as well. So these are some important questions that the society as a whole would have to consider.
Yes. Your Excellency, I wish we have some more time to ask some more questions, but maybe I'll stick to just one last question. Zero tolerance to indiscipline. Where is it heading? Received so much of attention from media, from general public, so much to do with the coverage that media has come up with. It was really talked about policy guideline once. What's happening to it?
Indeed, many people have made mountains out of molehills. And actually, these are the basic things that we need to be doing. If we care for our children, we have to provide the basic framework for behavior. So when we talk about zero tolerance, people might get the impression that the moment a student makes a small mistake or a child makes a small mistake, they're going to be in for serious trouble. It's not so. All these initiatives have been mounted to make sure that our children are able to live their lives properly. We're able to run the schools properly. Our teachers are able to do the job properly. In the long run, all these initiatives are directed at helping children to make their future. And I'm very sure that it is what the parents want, it is what the society wants, it is ultimately what the children themselves want. So if we bother about the future of our children, we have to be firm. And we can be very lax now. We can be very, very casual.
Yes.
And very easy. Children will like it now, but in the long run, that wouldn't help them. So we have to be firm. We have to be firm, but at the same time fair. So the idea is that we should not spare the rod and spoil the children. We believe that it's important. We owe it to the children to be able to create an environment which is secure, which is supportive, and which enables them to fulfill their lives' dreams.
Yes. Maybe one last question, Your Excellency. I have around 2 minutes or so. Now, education for all. It's important that we educate every child that we have in our society. But in doing so, this education, at least in our society, many would see it as a source of employment. One would look at it as getting employed later in life. If that's the case, then you educate everybody, and at the end of the day, if there's no employment opportunities in the market, they'll not want to go back to farms and work because they are educated. This is the kind of attitude that we have. What do we do?
We look at education both as a means as well as an end in itself. Education ought to be seen as an end in itself, because education is good. It is a virtue. Education makes people wise, knowledgeable, and virtuous. But at the same time, education also ought to be means to an end. And the end could be employment, and could be being able to grow up as a productive human being. So we hope that as we educate our people, they'll be able to find life much more meaningful. Because an educated person, an enlightened person, a wise person, I would believe is a much happier person, a much more content, a satisfied person, as compared to somebody who has not been able to have this advantage to educate himself or herself. But at the same time, there are also practical needs, immediate needs of work, employment, being able to serve the society. So we look at education as a matter of fact, both as a means as well as an end. And educated people are going to be much more resourceful. They'll be able to fend for themselves. Whereas if people have not had the opportunity of being educated, I would think that they're going to be so much more limited in that respect. So while it is important to find a job, while it is important to build careers, it is also important to grow up as good human beings. So education does this. Education ought to be both useful, but at the same time it also ought to make people graceful. So these two qualities are what education ought to be building in young people.
Yes. Thank you so much, Honorable Sherik Lyonpo, for your time. It was indeed a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much indeed.
With this, we come to the end of Dawai Kudroen. Thank you so much for watching Dawai Kudroen. We will be bringing you another edition of Dawai Kudroen next Wednesday. As promised earlier, we will try and get the presidents or the interim presidents of the newly registered political parties. Till then, it's time to say good night and thank you.